Saw service pretty much from March 1862 to March of 1864. Okay, by this time their numbers were so decimated that they had to fall in, with the 17th Maine and move on from there. So without further ado, I'm Bob Pierce. I'm the Sergeant Major with the 3rd Maine Infantry. You can tell I'm a Sergeant Major by my stripes. This is my service stripe. For how many years I served. This is Corporal Lavasser. Okay, you can tell she's also an NCO. This is portraying a rebel today. This is our 2nd sergeant. He's with the 3rd Maine Infantry as well, Sergeant Dalton. And this is our Quartermaster Sergeant Jay. All right, Jay's hired. As you can tell, the NCOs are below the captain, so my position would have more or less been a staff sergeant, okay? Quartermaster sergeant dealt mostly with handing out, gear, and items, keeping the, troops fed and everything. Then you have a 1st and 2nd sergeant, and then you had corporals who pretty much, run the camp. They keep all the privates in line, they keep them trained, and they keep them ready to go for when the captain, needs to form them up, okay? So we're gonna talk today a little bit about the 3rd Maine and the peach orchard, okay? It was a pivotal battle for the 3rd Maine. Grab my pointer. It's also a ramrod for a musket, so it has many purposes. If I'm the 1st sergeant behind my boys and they're not doing something right, it's not uncommon for me to reach over and give them a good tap, okay? So, July 2nd, 1863, you've all heard about the Battle of Gettysburg, okay? 3rd Maine was involved with that. The actions of July 1st, 1863 forced the Union line to take a defensive position from Culp's Hill along a 2.5-mile easterly road ending just before Devil's Den. Okay? Gettysburg would be way up here, okay? Going down to a southerly route. This is the Rose Farm. This is the Emmitsburg Road. The wheat field would have been way over here, okay, which is right next to the peach orchard, which is here, okay? The Confederate lines ran parallel to the Union line and were approximately a mile to the west on Seminary Ridge, which would have been way over here, okay? At the southern end of Seminary Ridge is a section of woods called Pitcher's Woods, located on Warfield Ridge, okay? So if I put this other map up, this is Seminary Ridge along here. This is Warfield Ridge that ran this way, okay? Pretty much from the advantage point of the little round top where we had cannon and infantry up there, and at the last moment, they could spot, Longstreet's troops moving behind these trees, so they knew something was going on. General Sickles arrived at Gettysburg just before noon, okay, and was ordered to take a position just below the round tops near Plum Creek. Okay, that would have been approximately a mile back over this way, over that way. Okay? This Union defensive line resembled the shape of a fish hook, okay? It started like way up here, came down here, and would loop around that way in the shape, again, in the shape of a fish hook. Okay? Upon arriving at his assigned position on the battlefield, which would have been Plum Creek right about here, Sickles was not pleased with his position. His 3rd Corps was placed at the end of the ridge in low ground before the ground rose sharply at the round tops, which would have been here and big round top here. And below the round tops, he would have been facing what they call Devil's Den. Have any of you ever been to Gettysburg and seen Devil's Den? A lot of rocks, okay? So again, the low ground, not too fun to be at. Prior to Gettysburg and backtracking a few months to May of 1863, Sickles was at the Battle of Chancellorsville. General Hooker was the commander of the Army of the Potomac at the time, gave permission for Sickles to reconnoiter the Confederate lines. Now I call it, today they call it recon, but it's a French word called reconnoiter, and which means to search for. Sickles pursued and engaged the rebels at a place called Catherine Iron Furnace, 2.5 miles northwest of Grove Hill. Hooker was convinced that Sickles was involved in engaging retreating rebels and decided to pull back and leave him to it. What he didn't realize is that Sickles was forced to fight alone against General Stonewall Jackson's entire brigade. Okay? By pulling back, Hooker left a 1.5-mile gap in the Union line. Stonewall Jackson's brigade formed a flanking maneuver that forced Sickles to retreat. Sickles tried to fight his way back to the Union line, but was unsuccessful and forced to hold a piece of high ground called Hazel Grove. Hooker then ordered Sickles to abandon his high ground and retreat back to the Union lines, but by doing so, Sickles took a terrible loss to his corps. From that moment forward, Sickles vowed never to place his men in the position again, and upon arriving at Gettysburg, Sickles decided the Peach Orchard high ground was where he wanted to be. So seeing unfavorable ground that he was ordered to defend, Sickles decided to send an expeditionary force out to probe the Confederate area. I would assume that he was doing this to justify his reason for choosing a more favorable location. Hey everybody, this is Private Ralph Pinto. He's with the 3rd Maine. Ralph. The 3rd Maine had arrived at the battlefield, and they were part of Sickles' 3rd Corps, as a company of approximately 210 men led by Colonel Moses B. Lakeman. Sickles then ordered 100 soldiers from the 1st Sharpshooters, led by Colonel Hiram Berdan, along with the 3rd Maine Infantry, to reconnoiter the Pitcher's Woods area on Warfield Bridge. The 6th New York Cavalry protected their left flank from the field. A little note about Berdan's sharpshooters. Do any of you know what I'm talking about as far as the Berdan sharpshooter? They were pretty much the Green Berets of the day. They dressed in green. Their buttons were not nice and shiny like this. They were black, so they were made to blend in with the woods and really, hide and give the enemy a hard target to find. Berdan sharpshooters were dressed in green wool uniforms with black buttons, like I just said. To qualify as a Berdan sharpshooter, this is really interesting, a soldier had fired 10 shots at 200-yard target. All 10 rounds had to fall under 50 inches, like on a sheet of plywood. They didn't have plywood. Okay, from the bullseye of the target to qualify. Many of these sharpshooters could get all shots within a 5-inch radius on their target. So most of these guys were, a lot of them were from New England, and they were really, really good at shooting because, as most New Englanders do, they hunt. So they were pretty good at what they did. Sickles ordered the force to halt on the Emmitsburg Road, which again is right here, which caused his expeditionary force to be observed by the Confederates on Warfield Bridge, way over here. They could see Sickles' men move out here and come along here, and they only had to go like 500 yards to get to this wooded area, so they were, picked right out. Sickles ordered the force to halt on Emmitsburg Road, and where they were observed. They then crossed the Emmitsburg Road and moved west towards Pitcher's Woods, okay? Again, here's Emmitsburg Road, okay? They marched out to here, and they came up along here, and you can see the 3rd Maine along with the 1st U.S. Sharpshooters, which is Berdan's men. right there, but they held up. The Confederate 10th Alabama took up a defensive position in Pitcher's Woods to counteract the reconnoiter force, 10th Alabama right here. The expeditionary force would be met by Confederate General Cadmus Wilcox's brigade of Alabamians from the 8th, 10th, and 11th Alabama. And keep track of this time frame, it's pretty interesting. At 12:19 p.m., the Union sharpshooters in 3rd Maine made contact with the awaiting 10th Alabama and were immediately driven back, okay? And again, right here, they also had a force out in front of them, and they made contact here, and of course a gun battle ensued. They were immediately driven back. At this point, most of the 3rd Maine infantry soldiers were positioned in the field and were immediately starting to take casualties. The sharpshooters in their nice green uniforms took the woods, and the 3rd Maine was moved out into this field. And of course that you know, they're in the wide open, facing 100 muskets. With the assistance of the sharpshooters, cavalry, and the 3rd Maine, the New York cavalry was over in this field here. I don't know why they didn't put that on there, but that's important. At this time, the 8th Alabama joined the 10th. The Confederate 11th Alabama pushed through the field to try to gather an advantage. But this is important, due to a critical error was commanded by Captain John Sanders to do a move that put their right flank exposed to Union troops. And I can tell you exactly what they did. The 11th Alabama came along here, and instead of doing a right wheel, which they would take their line and face this way, he ordered a left wheel, and he exposed his flank to the 3rd Maine and the sharpshooters, okay? I believe that the 11th Alabama captain had made a serious mistake. The 3rd Maine and 1st U.S. sharpshooters executed an enfilading fire, which meant they were firing. If their line is like this, they were firing right up through the lines, okay, decimating the 11th Alabamians. And as you can tell, their ranks were devastated and they were forced to retreat. The 8th Alabama, which is up here, did a flanking maneuver and backed the 11th Alabama and of course saved what little of the unit was left, saved them from total destruction. At this point, the 6th New York Cavalry departed the area, leaving the 1st U.S. sharpshooters exposed on their left flank and caused them to have to retreat. Again, the New York Cavalry was over here. Most of these sharpshooters were in the woods up to this point, so these guys didn't want to be left in the field open to enemy fire, so they just took off, which again opened up their left flank to be exposed. The 3rd Maine Infantry then received another crippling blow when the 8th Alabama delivered a full volley into their ranks in the open exposed field. At approximately 12:40, the sharpshooters and remnants of the remaining 3rd Maine then departed Pitcher's Woods and made a 500-yard trek back to the Emmitsburg Road. Most of the sharpshooters went into the battle carrying about 100 rounds per man, and their captain had predetermined that they would retreat when they had fired 95 rounds each. So by the time they made it back to Sickles' Corps, they had 5 rounds in their pouches. Most of the Maine men only carried between 40 and 60 rounds, so they would have been, you know, a lot of them would have been going back empty. All said and done, the fight lasted for only 20 minutes, leaving 38 3rd Maine boys and 19 sharpshooters dead and captured. Estimates vary. One very brave 1st U.S. sharpshooter decided to allow himself to be captured because his captain was mortally wounded and he wanted to make sure that, you know, he was treated properly. So he gave himself up and went back into the Confederate camps along Longstreet's Corps. And he was quite shocked to see, no matter where he looked, there were dead and dying Confederates laying there. That's Wilcox, as a matter of fact, thought he was up against another brigade when he was only up against 300 men. So that's how fierce these first U.S. sharpshooters were, with their targeting. Immediately upon return and reporting to Major General Sickles, that sent multiple messages to Major General Meade, who was in charge of commanding the Army of the Potomac. Sickles' messages were not answered. 12:55 p.m., the 3rd Maine Infantry was positioned in a skirmish line. Now they moved back, and they're way back over here. The 3rd Maine, along with the 2nd New Hampshire, the 2nd New Hampshire was actually a Portsmouth regiment, Portsmouth, New Hampshire regiment, okay? 3rd Maine beside them, 141st Pennsylvania, and the 3rd Michigan beside them, okay? They were sent out ahead of the normal battle lines as a skirmish force, okay? They were facing towards the south, towards the Rose Farm, which is down here. Beside them were the 2nd New Hampshire Infantry from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 141st Pennsylvania, and 3rd Michigan, like I just said. The remainder of the 1st U.S. Sharpshooters regained positions with other companies of their regiment. Now, the reason they didn't fall back to the normal lines was because they were meant to be guerrilla fighters or expeditionary, an expeditionary force. So they would fall back and wait for orders there. The skirmish line spent the afternoon under constant cannon and skirmish fire, again taking random casualties. So the 3rd Maine was involved in both the skirmish at Pitcher's Woods, and then they were thrown in front of the regular battle lines. So they were receiving a lot of rounds coming in, and again taking casualties. Around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and still not hearing from Meade, Sickles started moving his corps from their assigned position below the round tops to the peach orchard, about a mile ahead of the Union line. So he broke away from that fishhook line, and he moved a mile ahead because, again, he favored that high ground on the peach orchard so that his men would not be decimated again. However, facing all of those battalions of Longstreet, they can only fight for so long. By the time Meade replied to Sickles, Longstreet's rebels started to position themselves from Seminary Ridge, again, which is up here, and you can see these lines, these units in red. Those are all Confederates, and you can see the Union line is very sparse. It's not double lined or double brigades or anything like that. It's just a single line of companies, and with a couple skirmish line. Well, as a matter of fact, with only 4 companies out ahead of them, so they were up against quite a bit. So upon arriving to Sickles' camp, Meade realized that it was too late to get started because they could already see the rebels moving into place, okay? Meade realized that it was too late and started filling his exposed line with cannon. He also had, as Sickles' corps reached the peach orchard, Meade and his artillery officer, Brigadier General Henry Hunt, finally made contact with Sickles. Little interesting